Today is Decoration Day, the traditional day to honor the soldiers who fought and died to preserve the Union. There are veterans buried here from throughout America's conflicts. Their names are still familiar amongst the families of Nunda. Their service and sacrifice are the epitome of dedication to honor and country. I am humbled in the presence of so many honored dead. Today we will step back in time, 150 years, to a time just following the end of the American Civil War. The nation was celebrating the end of the war, yet mourning the death of our president. It was against this backdrop that the people of Nunda came together to dedicate this spot. The men you see before you come from Nunda and represent the 136th New York Volunteer Infantry, who served with distinction and came from this area, including Captain John Hand of the 136th, who is buried over there. The stacked arms you see before you represent the most basic equipment of the soldier, ever ready to be taken up should the nation's need require. Officer of the Guard, display the accoutrements of the soldier. The ammunition box, along with the rifle, allows the soldier to do his work in defense of the country. The haversack was used for 3 days' rations while on the march. The knapsack allowed the soldier to carry the basic necessities for months on campaign. The humble canteen, however, is held with a special reverence. No greater tribute to shared hardships could one soldier give another than the observation, "We drank from the same canteen." President Lincoln, in his second inaugural address, offered the following words of reconciliation: "With malice towards none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right. Let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations." On the first Decoration Day ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery, General James A. Garfield gave the following remarks: "I am oppressed with a sense of the impropriety of uttering words on this occasion. If silence is ever golden, it must be here beside the graves of 15,000 men, whose lives were more significant than speech, and whose death was a poem, the music of which can never be sung. With words we make promises, plight faith, praise virtue. Promises may not be kept, plighted faith may be broken, and vaunted virtue be only the cunning mask of vice. We do not know one promise these men made, one pledge they gave, one word they spoke, but we do know they summed up and perfected, by one supreme act, the highest virtues of men and citizens. For love of country they accepted death, and thus resolved all doubts, and made immortal their patriotism and their virtue. For the noblest man that lives, there still remains a conflict. He must still withstand the assaults of time and fortune, must still be assailed with temptations, before which lofty natures have fallen. But with these the conflict ended, the victory was won, when death stamped on them the great seal of heroic character, and closed a record which years can never blot. I know of nothing more appropriate on this occasion than to inquire what brought these men here, what high motive led them to condense life into an hour, and to crown that hour by joyfully welcoming death. Let us consider. 8 years ago, this was the most unwarlike nation on the earth. For nearly 50 years, no spot in any of these states had been the scene of battle. 30 millions of people had an army of less than 10,000 men. The faith of our people in the stability and permanence of their institutions was like their faith in the eternal course of nature. Peace, liberty, and personal security were blessings as common and universal as sunshine and showers and fruitful seasons, and all sprang from a single source, the old American principle that all owed due submission and obedience to the lawfully expressed will of the majority. This is not one of the doctrines of our political system. It is the system itself. It is our political firmament, in which all other truths are set as stars in heaven. It is the encasing air, the breath of the nation's life. Against this principle, the whole weight of the rebellion was thrown. Its overthrow would have brought such ruin as might follow in the physical universe. If the power of gravitation were destroyed and nature's concord broke, among the constellations war were sprung, two planets rushing from aspect malign. Of fiercest opposition in mid-sky should combat, and their jarring spheres confound. The nation was summoned to arms by every high motive which can inspire men. 2 centuries of freedom had made its people unfit for despotism. They must save their government or miserably perish. As a flash of lightning in a midnight tempest reveals the abysmal horrors of the sea, so did the flash of the first gun disclose the awful abyss into which rebellion was ready to plunge us. In a moment, the fire was lighted in 20 million hearts. In a moment, we were the most warlike nation on the earth. In a moment, we were not merely a people with an army. We were a people in arms. The nation was in column, not all at the front, but all in the array. I love to believe that no heroic sacrifice is ever lost, that the characters of men are molded and inspired by what their fathers have done, that treasured up in American souls are all the unconscious influences of the great deeds of the Anglo-Saxon race, from Agincourt to Bunker Hill. It was such an influence that yet led a young Greek 2,000 years ago, when musing on the Battle of Marathon, to exclaim, "In the trophies of Miltiades, will not let me sleep." Would these men be silent in 1861? These whose ancestors had felt the inspiration of battle on every field where civilization had fought in the last 1,000 years? Read their answer in this green turf. Each for himself gathered up the cherished purposes of life, its aims and ambitions, its dearest affections, and flung all, with life itself, into the scale of battle. And now consider the silent assembly of the dead. What does it represent? Nay, rather, what does it not represent? It is an epitome of the war. Here are sheaves reaped in the harvest of death from every battlefield of Virginia. If each grave had a voice to tell us what its silent tenant last saw and heard on earth, we might stand with uncovered heads and hear the whole story of the war. We should hear that one perished when the first great drops of the crimson shower began to fall, when the darkness of that first disaster at Manassas fell like an eclipse on the nation, that another died of disease while wearily waiting for winter to end, that this one fell on the field in sight of the spires of Richmond, little dreaming that the flag must be carried through 3 more years of blood before it should be planted in that citadel of treason. And that one fell when the tide of war had swept us back till the roar of rebel guns shook the dome of the Capitol and re-echoed in the chambers of the Executive Mansion. We should hear mingled voices from the Rappahannock, the Rapidan, the Chickahominy, and the James, solemn voices from the Wilderness, and triumphant shouts from the Shenandoah. From Petersburg and the Five Forks, mingled with the wild acclaim of victory and the sweet chorus of returning peace. The voices of these dead will forever fill the land like holy benedictions. What other spot so fitting for their last resting place as this under the shadow of the Capitol saved by their valor? Here, where the grim edge of battle joined, here where all the hope and fear and agony of their country centered. Here let them rest, asleep on the nation's heart, entombed in the nation's love. Let us now resolve, as our beloved martyred president resolved, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Officer of the Guard, salute the honored dead. Officer of the Guard, retrieve the accoutrements of the soldier. This concludes the ceremony of rededication. I gratefully thank Mr. Cook for allowing us to participate. With that, I will hand it back to the Historical Society and the Village of Nunda.